I'm turning to Catherine Bennett, our business editor. Joe Biden at one point allude to the new Ebola outbreak back in 2015. The Americans were front and center. He led the charge definitely this Friday in that pledge of $7.5 billion from G7 members for the Global Vaccine Fund.
That's absolutely right. And of course, this comes after this criticism that these wealthier countries are hoarding the vaccines at the expense of poorer nations, of course. So as you said, G7 countries said they will commit $7.5 billion. The European Commission also announced today that it would contribute an extra $500 million to COVAX, and that brings the EU's contribution to $1 billion. Now, these financial pledges come after the UN said that global vaccine distribution at the moment was wildly uneven and unfair. And the NGO Amnesty International blasted vaccine inequity as an abject moral failure that will ultimately harm rich countries. Well, obviously the message got through. The US, of course, is stepping up its funding as well. President Joe Biden promising $4 billion to the COVAX program. Well, this approach to spending your way out of the COVID-19 crisis is reminiscent of US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's call back in January to act big. Yellen has been pushing for a large stimulus package in the US in order to get the US economy back on track. Now, she said in an interview with CNBC yesterday that the $1.9 trillion deal could get the US back to full employment in a year. Now, let's take a look at what's happening in Wall Street after those remarks yesterday. Well, stocks rose today, rebounding after 3 straight days of losses. The Dow Jones, they're up 0.25%. The S&P 500 just up over the flat line, and the Nasdaq up 0.33%. Over in Europe at the close, markets also advanced at the end of the week. London's FTSE was up 0.1%. Paris's CAC 40 was up more than that, over 0.75%, along with Frankfurt's DAX as well. Now, a quick note on Bitcoin, which has hit a new record high. The total value of all Bitcoin reached $1 trillion today on Friday, finishing off a record-breaking week for the cryptocurrency. Now, the British Supreme Court has ruled in favour of Uber drivers wanting to be classified as workers and not self-employed. Now, that's a decision sure to send shockwaves through the gig economy, as it could inspire legal action against similar companies that rely on gig workers. Yinka Oyatade has more.
Joy and jubilation from these Uber drivers as they celebrate a massive shift in their job status. This after the UK Supreme Court ruled that the company's drivers must be classed as workers and not self-employed, meaning they are entitled to a minimum wage and paid holiday. The ruling upholds a 2016 decision by the British Employment Tribunal.
The Employment Tribunal was right to find that Uber drivers are workers, who therefore qualify for the rights conferred on workers by employment legislation.
Uber had tried to fight the judgment by arguing that the company was simply a platform that connected drivers with potential passengers, but the Supreme Court ruled that the ride-hailing giant operates like an employer, as it does things like setting fares, which affects how much a driver earns, and uses a star rating system to discipline drivers. The Employment Tribunal will now decide on how much to compensate drivers over lost pay. Lawyers say some could be entitled to €13,000. Welcome news for those struggling financially. The ride-hailing app's fares have dropped by 80% as a result of the pandemic.
We have drivers working very long hours, taking home gross about £30 to £50, yeah? And that can't be right, especially for a company, making a lot of money on the back of these workers with absolutely no liability.
While Friday's ruling will only initially affect 25 out of the company's 65,000 British drivers, it could shake the gig economy globally. While companies argue the sector gives people flexibility, critics say it leaves workers unprotected.
The UK warehouse leasing firm Segro said today that its profits soared 62% in 2020. Online shopping has boomed during the pandemic, and logistics and warehouse businesses like Segro are reaping the benefits, as companies require industrial space to keep their stock. In the third quarter of 2020, UK warehouse owners leased out more than double the space leased in the same period the year before. The warehouse industry also had more pressure in the first few weeks of 2021 with Brexit, as companies in the UK stockpiled stockpiled goods to mitigate the disruption caused by the UK leaving the EU single market and customs union. The fast food chain McDonald's has set a goal of having an equal number of men and women in leadership roles by 2030. Company data from 2018 showed that women made up 32% of senior management roles. The food giant is also planning to increase minority representation in senior roles from 29 to 35% over the next 4 years. The firm announced these objectives after last year facing repeated accusations of racism and sexual harassment in company culture. And that wraps up the business from me.
All right, many thanks for that, Catherine Bennett. We'll have more business news later.